The authors of that pamphlet, Steve Reed, joins me now. Welcome. Before we go into the details, can I just suggest to you, aren't you a bit late with this? I mean, the campaign's begun. Shouldn't you, rather than come out with new ideas, be getting behind the ones your leader is fighting?
Well, Ed Miliband's been supporting this kind of approach for years now. He gave a speech almost exactly a year ago, the Hugo Young Memorial Lecture, calling for more people-powered public services, and we've been talking about and developing these ideas until now. And what we've come up with in this pamphlet is some real-life examples of how those work,
tell us,
the difference they make.
What are people-powered public services?
It's giving the people that are using public services more control over the decisions that get taken about them. For instance, you've got people living with conditions now, health conditions that they didn't have when the NHS was set up, like more people with diabetes, more people living longer with mental ill health. Very often the decisions that are taken about the services that those people use, they feel don't quite fit their lives. And if you involve those people directly in taking the choices about the services they will receive and what they will do, you get better services that cost less, and those people end up happier.
But isn't it axiomatic that people power, if people have real power, they need to have choice. They need to have the ability to say, if this isn't giving me what I need to be able to go elsewhere. How does that chime with Andy Burnham's determination that the NHS will be the preferred provider?
Well, choice to an extent, but the choice between two bad options is as bad as no choice at all. And what we're saying is that if you give people more control over the particular service they are using,
but how do they have that control? This is a bit I'm missing. How do the control I have over Tesco is to go to Sainsbury's or Lidl or wherever? How do I have that control in the public service if the NHS is the monopoly provider?
Well, we've given you examples in the pamphlet that we published today.
We haven't already yet.
In the pamphlet that do exactly that. Well, if you've got people who are living with mental ill health, instead of just assessing them and then allocating them a particular service, you sit them down, as an organisation like Turning Point would do, you talk to them about what they want to achieve with their life, and then you shape the service around them using the budget that you are going to use with them in any case.
But how are they sure that, how do they make that happen? What happens if the public service, and as you know, public services are often in the grip of producer interests. Producer interests are very powerful. Well, what happens? What does the patient in this case do? The consumer of the health service. What do they do if the producer interest says, we're not going to go that way?
Well, you have to find mechanisms that equalise the power relationship between the provider of the service and the person that's using it.
What does that mean in English?
Is that not English? I'll give you an example from housing, if I can. If you're living... I used to be a councillor in Brixton. There was a housing estate there called the Blenheim Gardens Estate. It was very run down. People were very unhappy living there. We set up a tenant management board, so the tenants appointed the managers of the housing estate, and they did what the tenants wanted. The service improved dramatically.
Sure.
We equalised the power. The tenants had much more power than they'd had previously.
Sure, but in housing there is no preferred provider, and people can vote with their feet to different forms of ownership or different types of rent. That's not what Mr. Burnham is offering on the NHS, even though sourcing out of some clinical procedures to private providers, still free, paid for by the taxpayer, is only at about 6%, not much more than it was under Labour. He doesn't seem to want more of that.
Well, what the Tories
do you want more of that?
What the Tories are trying to do is privatise everything, expose everything to privatisation every time. It's in the health and care bill.
But putting things out to tender is not privatisation. It's still paid for by the state, and it's still free. That's what you started under you. In what way is that privatisation?
Instead of the disruption of privatisation, why not find ways that give patients more control over the services they're using?
So the Blair-Brown government privatised chunks of the health service then?
We're not in 97 now, we're in 2015.
That's not the answer. I'm not talking about 97.
Things are very different.
I'm not talking about 97. I'm talking about from 206 to 210, when the Blair-Brown government doubled the amount of stuff that went out to tender. Was that privatisation?
Neither Andy or I or Liz or anyone else saying there's no role for the private sector.
Was that privatisation?
You can bring in the private sector to add capacity where
you need it.
You're not answering
my question. Was it privatisation what they did?
There's not a straightforward answer to that, because
it's either yes or no would be straightforward, or I don't know.
I don't think it is entirely. I think what you're trying to do is add capacity to the public sector, where otherwise you wouldn't be able to do the things you want. But the key point is control. It's not privatisation, it's control by patients.
Do you buy this?
I think there's quite a big ideological divide in the Labour Party, and it's being argued out in code at the moment. So the talk about consumers having power rather than producers, if consumers are really going to have power, they need to have choice, and part of that choice might be to go to a private provider. And the problem with Andy Burnham's position is that involving the private sector is seen as privatisation. Whereas actually, I mean, you've got the figures, I'm sure, Andrew, but the amount of private sector involvement in the NHS has gone up from around 5% in 2010 to 6% now.
It's 1%.
It's a complete red herring.
In the past 4 years, the rate of increase of using the private sector has been at half the rate of increase it was in the last 5 years of the Labour government.
But the government are signalling that they would like to bring in more, missing the point about how do you actually give patients, the people using those services, more control over what's happening to them.
The real problem with the government's reforms is that they put the power in the hands of the producers, the doctors and things, rather than patients. But the problem with the Labour argument is it's gone down this red herring route of condemning it to privatisation.
Can I just point out what you've done there? You see, the Labour claim at the moment is that the government is privatising the health service. That's the mantra at the moment. When the figures are put to you, you then don't deny the figures because they show it's not really happening. You say, oh, it's going to. So what is it? Is it doing it now, or is it planning to do it in the future?
Well, they have done it a bit already,
well, they have.
and they want to do it more in the
done?
future. I just think they're coming at it from the wrong. They're coming at it from the wrong angle.
No, I'm not. I was asking you, what have they done?
Well, you just cited the figure.
But the rate of increase is at half the rate of increase it was under you.
It's still increasing, and it's the wrong starting point. Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, they're starting from where you left off.
Well, I mean, while I think you can't disagree with the idea of getting more people involved in their services and getting them involved, but equally,
how do you do it?
Well, people, I don't actually think want that. They want to turn up to the doctor and they just want someone to be there and they want to go out the door as fast as possible. I mean, for long-term cases, a lot of the time, maybe if you've got some chronic condition, then getting involved is good.
A lot of what the NHS does is chronic condition management. Yeah. And if you're talking to people, I met a group of teenagers with diabetes. They were much better at managing those conditions when they had control over the services they were receiving. They were happier. The outcomes were better. They were living happier lives. It was more efficient. It didn't cost more money.
Lord Darzai, Labour peer, told Newsnight last night, quote, he believes we should prefer the providers who deliver the highest quality care, whether they be public, private or not-for-profit. Do you agree?
Well, we should do what works, absolutely. We should.
So you do agree with them?
We should do what works, but
that's not Labour's policy.
It is Labour's policy.
No, I'm sorry. NHS is the preferred provider under Labour's policy. He's saying we should prefer whoever delivers the highest quality care.
But you can make the NHS work better by giving patients more control, is what I'm saying. You don't need to privatise it to get that effect.
Yeah, I'm still trying to work out in what sense it's being privatised. Are you not surprised? Because if it's being privatised now, you did it as well. So I don't see why it's wrong for this government to do it, but right for your government.
We can learn from the past, can't we?
Well, it seems to me you want more of the past,
but there's very little money around at the moment. You want more of it to make, if we were to privatise more, we'd be leaking money out into shareholder dividends instead of using every pound and penny to provide the healthcare that people want. The way to make that money work more effectively is to listen to patients and do more of what they're saying.
So you disagree with Lord Darzai?
I do in that respect, yes. I mean, I respect him, I've heard him speak before, but I think the key to this is giving the people using the services more control, and that works across all public services, not just health.
Is it not bizarre that given that the NHS is at the front and centre of the Labour campaign, and that this is what they hope will win them the election, because the Tories don't poll well in the NHS, that Labour's having this argument?
It's slightly bizarre, but I think that
at this stage
there may be an element of hope that people just sort of skirt over that, and that privatisation...
He doesn't know that. He wants people to read his pamphlet.
Well, yeah, but if you just sort of keep shouting that the Tories are out to privatise everything, then maybe that will just cut through. Maybe it doesn't matter too much. The irony is that actually
Labour's got quite a sensible policy on social care, improving the care of the elderly at home, and how that integrates better with the NHS.
That's the big reform that's needed, isn't it? Integration between care and health.
But the politics has got muddled up with this whole privatisation debate.
Has Mr Miliband read your pamphlet?
I don't know. I'll ask him.
You said sent him a signed copy?
He did it. Well, they saw it in advance. Yes, he's been on this agenda for years.
Did he approve it in advance?
He enjoys it. I hope he enjoys it. I didn't have to ask permission.
No, I don't know what that was.